Much. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome along to this afternoon. We'll just outline some of the rules of engagement. So I will moderate from the floor. You're free to put up your hand at any point in time and ask a question. You can't, however, ask a question around a specific client engagement or name a particular client by name. So just as a small rule, we'll also ask the members of the panel. They are here as representatives purely of themselves. The views they express are their personal opinions, not of their firms. We're working on the basis that this is Chatham House rule, so you may repeat what you've heard in here but may not attribute the source. Other aspects of this afternoon, while this may look like a Jerry Springer engagement, we don't encourage people from the client side to attack the people on the panel. However much you might feel like doing that. No, at a serious level, the panelists this afternoon have been picked by virtue of your votes, and again, to emphasize, it's about the individuals and their insights and views. Between them, they must have at least 100 years experience in the shared services, global business services, BPO space, both as advisors, intermediates, consultants, trusted advisors, all of those things. And so they're going to share their insights. We've got a full hour. I'm not going to take up all of that. We're going to open up and run through 4 or 5 key topic areas or themes, and these will follow on from what we've heard earlier in the conference. As we go through, we're going to have some interactive voting, and we're also going to have some interactive questions. So if you need to ask questions, please put up your hand. We have got roving mics. The plan is that we'll run through for the hour, maybe even get you out 5 minutes earlier on that. Okay, so you all know how the interactive technology works. Our panelists this afternoon, 6 is the new 8. Our panelists this afternoon who are going to come to the podium in alphabetical order by first name. This is not the order they were voted in on. They want me to stress that. Big hearts, big brains, egos the size of Montana, but never mind that. In the order, alphabetical order, Arno Franz, who's partner and president of TPI. Asesh Mira, who's head of BPO at Infosys BPO. We have Donald Graham, who's partner at Deloitte, who you heard yesterday. Peter Barther, principal consulting at Deloitte. Ray Selford, who's national lead partner of procurement and shared services at KPMG. And Raja Vinkavar, who's sales and marketing and M&A at Exchanging. Ladies and gentlemen, your G6 panel for this afternoon. Okay, you're all consenting adults. Let the games begin. We're going to start with a discussion on the mid-market. And Peter, you've now left the sort of pure sourcing advisory space. In terms of your view on this, do you think the mid-market's finally going to deliver in the shared services and the BPO space? Will we actually see mid-market solutions starting to emerge, or is that still some way off?
I think it's a little way off, but I think we're heading very rapidly towards accessible options in the mid-market. I think there's a confluence of things. The suppliers generally are looking at that market as a very serious and very large space. And obviously, they lead with solutions that work. And I think technology generally is making options available to the mid-market in ways that were inaccessible in the past. So you've got a sort of avoidance of capital, real options to avoid capital demand, easy on implementations without needing to go the big monolithic ERP path. So all of these things are keys that make it accessible for the mid-market. And there's a focus there, and there's a real need in that market to access the benefits and compete with the players of scale. So lots of forces at work that are driving it quickly.
Roger, can I ask if we go to the mid-market, and I'm a mid-market player and I go to you, does that mean I've got to compromise any form of customization and essentially take what's on offer, a one-size-fits-all? Is that the price of the mid-market?
Well, that was probably true a couple of years back. I don't think it's true today. Today, thanks to, obviously cloud is something which we all read about, and I'm not sure how many of us really understand what it's all about, but I think the 4 key principles of IaaS AAAS, interesting, SaaS, and OaaS, and I'll probably talk about all the four, will ensure that the mid-market will have customizable solutions for areas they think are core to them. I don't think they'll have differentiators in terms of how to run an AP or an AR or a GL system, but the way they treat the customers, for example, definitely there are systems available to make it customizable, focusing on individual SMEs, definitely. So if you want the four things to talk about,
let's go.
Infrastructure as a service, applications as a service, software as a service, and operations as a service. So put together, I'm seeing a trend of an integrated value-based model for delivery for SMEs.
But it sounds to me all they are offering me, though, is a standardized desktop through Citrix.
Not really. No. See, the key differentiator from a Citrix-based standardized solution for an AP or an AR solution to actually running a customizable center for a customer is how well is your knowledge centered, how well it is accessible, and how well is it searchable. So, so what we are seeing is a trend towards customer-based knowledge, customer-centric, philosophies, and it's not complex now. Thanks to cloud and thanks to the systems, it's not as complex as it was 3 years back. 3 years back, yes, not now.
So, Asesh, what are we going to get in from the mid-market from you guys? Have you got a mid-market offering?
I guess we've always had a mid-market offering.
Nobody wanted to buy it, was that it?
Nobody could afford it, I guess, and now it is more affordable. So really, I mean, if you look at the mid-market, they've struggled because it's been CapEx investment. They've not had that. And I think, as Raja mentioned, cloud, which tomorrow we can call it Galaxy and then we can call it Mars. I think it's basic. A managed services solution which has been delivered by organizations for 20 years now in different forms, right? So this whole sexy word of cloud, I don't know how much I buy into that. But the whole managed services piece is giving them an opportunity to really deliver or compete with the tier 1 players as well. And I think over the last couple of years, and we talked about it at last year's conference, what we call BPO 3.0, there is an offering out there. It is standardized to probably 90%. So it's a shared services utility, if you may, that everybody can just plug in with a USB, use it when they want, and disengage when they do feel that there is a ramp down, business is slowed down. It's basically pay by the drink, right? And that's what we have for them.
Arno, do you think the mid-market's a reality, or is this just a sort of a piece of brochureware that we leave out there so people feel good?
I think that there's a lot of competition in the marketplace, and although you'll always have the very large players such as IBM, Accenture, Infosys, etc., playing out there, and they will only ever be used at a certain end of the market, large-scale operations and such like. Because the competition is so strong in the rest of the market, excluding those outliers, then it is actually now forcing those organisations to come up with those platforms. And in fact, we actually see a lot of work and a lot of effort and thought going into actually developing platforms which could be cloud-based, but are actually trying to drive to that mid-market type area. So I think, it's probably still brochureware today, and I agree with Peter's point, that'll still take some time, but we are seeing real attempts at those service providers in wanting to close the gap between clients' expectations about, I need this, as opposed to what's currently actually on offer. So I think there's been a bit of an inflection point that has occurred in the last little while. Some of it may have been generated through the GFC in the needs that have come out through that particular episode across the globe.
Okay. We've got some panel questions or some interactive questions. Can we bring up the first interactive question, polling question for the audience? Okay. I want to turn to the issue of people, leadership, change, and talent. And the first question we have is, what is your current staff turnover in your delivery centre today? If it's more than 20% plus 1, if it's between 15 and 20 plus 2, 10 to 15 plus 3, 5 to 10 plus 4, and if it's less than 5%, press 5.
Excuse me.
Okay, so 28% of people, so what's that, about 1 in 6 have less than 5%, 20% of 5 to 10, 27%. So above 15%, we've got 17, 27, 8. Okay, so over 50% of you are experiencing staff turnover levels of between 10 and 15%. So in a 3-year period, that's a 45% attrition rate. Yeah? 30 to potentially up to 45% attrition rate. Donald Graham, what would you be saying to the people who were, churning 20% or more in their delivery centres? 17% of people have a churn of more than 20%.
I think you've got to look at a number of things around that, and it touches on some of the discussion we had yesterday. I think some of the promise of shared services going back 10 years ago was, job rotation, moving out into the business and so on. I think to some extent a lot of organisations failed to deliver on that, although it was really gratifying to hear the story that Charles Gray told, from a Macquarie perspective. I think if you actually look at, part of the reason people will actually stay in shared services is around that. What I think a lot of organisations are, given it's driven by metrics, a lot of organisations around this don't actually measure it very well. For example, what percentage of your current workforce actually come in from the rest of the business, 20-odd% or whatever it might be? What percentage of your workforce has actually gone and transitioned into the business? So if you're not measuring that and actually using it, that is kind of part of your retention policy. I think people are going to fail to actually see the kind of line of sight. I'd make a second point, and that is shared services are actually very often quite a flat structure, so it can be hard to see the career path beyond team leader and so on. And I think one of the techniques organisations use very well that are good at this is actually look at job families. So it kind of spider graphs into the rest of the organisation, so you can actually provide a line of sight to the individuals about where their skills and where they are actually might lead to other kind of opportunities in the wider engagement, in the wider organisation.
Ray, you surprised at those numbers or where you thought they might be?
No, I tend to agree with Donald. I think the tendency for talent to move around out of shared services, and particularly offshore, onshore, has increased quite significantly. And I think if you nurture it correctly, then it's an asset, right? So in my experience, certainly in Asia, the shortage of key talent has brought people onshore from traditional offshore locations like China and India and Malaysia, because they have the talent, they have the organisation or cultural aspect, and then they can come in and do succession planning. But I agree with Donald, not many organisations don't measure it that way. It just naturally happens and is classed as attrition, when actually it's partly succession planning if you do it well.
Okay. Peter, can I turn to you in terms of leadership and shared services, delivery of global business services? Do you think that we have an adequate model for attracting and retaining the leadership talent within the delivery centres that we have, or do we need something to start doing something different?
Well, I think the development of leadership broadly is a problem that has many facets. And just talking about the turnover rates underscores some of the challenges with finding and retaining talent and polishing the gems, as it were, for the future. I think one of the areas I find quite interesting with the shared services story is it moves talent from the business to the centre. We always hear talk about centres from the point of view of capability and cost. But at its heart, a shared service centre has a very strong talent component to it. The availability, the quantity, the quality, the cost, and the sustainability of talent is a major strategic lever for shared service success. So developing leadership in an enterprise requires both competence and organizational alignment. So creating the barrier, if you like, between the shared service centre and its customers by moving the centre to a concentrated location does actually undermine the internship model for the development of leadership. So strategies are needed to deal with that. I think some of the responsibility for that rests with the enterprise that wants to develop its leaders. Some of it rests with the professions, and some of it rests with industry bodies and shapers. So I was talking recently with the Victorian government, and they are part of a broad initiative around shared services capability development in region. And one of the things they're doing there is developing an approach which provides people with a view of the career path, a little bit like Donald's comment about the spider, the web view of where your career goes, but actually providing a clear view for people who enter that type of business as to how and where their careers will develop, and then providing leadership through government initiatives to help organizations develop around that. But it's a big challenge area.
Arno, client has turned up and client said we're going regional shared service centres, primarily initially in the finance space. We're going to have one in EMEA somewhere near Bucharest or Budapest or Prague. We're going to have one serving Asia Pac. We'd like your advice about the leadership of the Asia Pac Centre. It's going to be potentially in the mix, or Sydney, Melbourne, but we're looking at KL, potentially going to Penang, and we're looking for a leader for this. And nobody in the organisation, we've got some really competent controllers in the organisation, running country controllers. None of them really have any shared services experience or GBS experience. But we know there are talented people out there in the marketplace, and we're tempted to go out and recruit somebody who's built 3 shared service centres. What would you be advising them?
I wouldn't advise them to go to Sydney or Melbourne, because they're obviously not going to be the financial centres now that the SGX ASX merger acquisition is off the table. Just before I answer that, I was really surprised by those numbers. Because it told me that in the lowest 2 categories that there's like no churn going on. And I thought, that's too much stability. 28% less than 5%, that's too much stability in an organisation. There's not enough new life and talent being breathed into it. But in terms of answering your question, I think what we have seen across Asia is global organisations, global corporations, some Australian, but mostly European and American based, who have extended their global footprint through their shared services operations and have established quite strong centres in the primary locations of India and of late in China. So I think there would be my recruiting ground, not in Australia, but it would be in those locations, because there is a true global view taking place. That's where scalability is happening. That's where economics of scale are going on. And that's where talent is being drawn to from a much larger pool, as opposed to here in Australia, where we actually do have a talent shortage. And there is a war for talent going on here. Certainly there is in India and China as well, but it's different. And I think they'd be much better in trying to recruit from those grounds in terms of fulfilling that role. But those statistics did surprise me.
Sash, where do you find leadership talent? Do you look for vertical experience, or do you just look for people that can run big industrialised process centres?
I think, Martin, it's a combination of a few skills that we look for. One, being the kind of service provider we are, we absolutely need domain knowledge, right? So we do look for that kind of talent. So really, it's 3 different streams that we look at. We look at people managers who can manage a shop, motivate people, keep their tuition levels low, and show a career path to people. 2, you look for domain, right? You look for individuals who come in with a specific domain that you are looking for to either build or to enhance. And the 3rd piece is you look for individuals who have had the experience of building something ground up, because typically when we do look for leadership talent to go build a center, it's in a new location, right? And we look for people who have had that greenfield experience to be able to build something ground up. And there are 2 different skill sets we look for. So you look for someone who can go build something ground up, and then you look for someone who can take what that individual has built and brought to steady state to take to the next level. So there are 2 different skill sets that you really look for in that one individual.
Donald's suggestion there that you need somebody to build your centre and then you need them to move on and give it to somebody else to optimise and run maybe after you've migrated everything in. We agree with that?
Broadly, yes. I mean, I think you need to look at that, but I think the skill sets, in terms of transition, up to and after transition, you're looking at, really strong domain knowledge, project management, real capability, and ideally a track record in doing it. I agree with that. I think then in terms of the individual that's actually going to run it, I think it then switches much more into a customer relationship, customer management, people management type of skills. So certainly when I'm working with organizations, I do say, don't necessarily pick the individual you think that's going to run it before you go live. Yeah. So.
Okay. Can we look at the next piece of interactive polling? So you're all currently, how many people are currently in the middle of budgeting for next year? Yeah? Okay, we'd like to get some insights into what you think salary inflation in your shared services for the fiscal year 2011-2012 is going to be. More than 4, 3 to 4, 2 to 3, less than 2. Voting begins now. Okay, so 46% of you are slating in somewhere around 3.5% salary increases. You probably gave 3.5% last year. You gave 3.5% the year before. And the Aussie dollar is currently at 105, nearly 106. Ray, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's an unusual finding. I think some of our...
What are you paying next year?
Personally, depends on Donald. But no, I think
we're paying more than they are.
Get what you pay for. But
as I said,
I think salary inflation has actually been suppressed post GFC a little bit more than we would expect. The war on talent and the demand for talent has pulled through. We're seeing that now with some of the demands for rises in salaries, and not just salaries, but the work environment that we put in place for people. And I think that will continue, but with some degree of caution. So my view is I don't think that's surprising. I think there is a push there. I think the continued shortage of talent, particularly in this part of the world, will drive that up a little bit further in the next year or so.
Peter, surprised by those numbers, or where you thought they'd be?
Somewhat surprised. I think the comments about talent are spot on. I think there's going to have to be some sort of give on the pressure to hang on to talent, and it ties back to the leadership, but also there's a capability and a competence dimension to that. I think there's another interesting phenomenon. A few years ago we would have talked about pay for performance and have people's compensation tied to kickers associated with performance. And there's been a big shake-up in that space, I think, for obvious reasons around the financial crisis, but also resistance to executive pay for performance packages, and that cascades down. So I think the issue now is performance is table stakes. So there's got to be a realignment of fair pay for performance, that it shouldn't be tied to kickers. And I think that's where talent will really be pushing back on their employers to recognize that performance and to manage performance as a matter outside of the compensation discussion. And that, again, puts more pressure, I think, on the upper end, the more expensive people sometimes, to actually get a bigger increment. I think budget balance is going to be a big challenge for operations and centres particularly.
Okay. Raja, you seen similar trends, or what are you budgeting for next year in your delivery centres?
Well, actually, I'll be very happy with a 4% salary increase, honestly. Extremely happy about it. A third of my workforce is in India. And anything under 14% is absolutely fantastic for me.
Anything under 14%?
Yeah, I mean, India, typically, see the inflation today in India is anything between 8 to 10%. So, if I put a COLA adjustment to it, I'm looking at about 12 to 14%. So in the standard salary increase in India this year is going to be not less than 14%. That's the cheapest I can think of.
At 12%, it's going to double what, every 6 years?
I don't think it'll double in 6 years. See,
Well, 12%, rule of 72, 6.
no. I'm talking about this year. This year, 14%, definitely. But I'm seeing the trend decrease. So, it'll double definitely, but I don't think it'll double in 5, 6 years. It'll probably double in about 10 years. But it will double. So no two ways about it. Second is in terms of people skills and attracting the right talent and so on and so forth. It all depends upon which part of the value chain I'm actually working in. If it's something very generic, something very basic, I see probably a little more than usual. But if I'm seeing high-end work, I'm actually able to attract people at even lower salaries because people would love to go and see what is, for example, CAD modeling all about. I'm able to attract talent, and maybe after 3 years, there's a big jump. But I can utilize
So
talent.
you're offering them self-actualization opportunities. Is
Absolutely,
that what you're telling
we are.
them?
This is all we do actually.
Oh no, he's telling me salaries are going to double every 6 years. What's your advice to clients in that scenario?
Well, I think those numbers, I would hesitate to guess that they're predominantly an onshore number.
Yeah.
And like that very famous Australian film, The Castle, if they're planning for their budgets now, I would come back and say, tell them you're dreaming. Because there is no way you're going to be getting 4% or 3% increases. In this economy here in Australia, the only places that are going to be paying out any sort of decent pay rises are going to be in the resources sector, not for the rest of us. All you've got to do is look at the last lot of profit results that came through in the profit reporting season. It's a mixed bag, right? It is a two-speed economy, and most of you would be feeling that, whether it's even if it's in the banking sector. Yes, there might be a war for talent, as I said before, but it's in particular selected areas. And I think for the general type of person that you'd have in a delivery centre, you're not going to be giving them 4% pay increases. There's enough employment going around at the moment with a bit of churn. So I think those numbers are, I think you're dreaming. If it's your budget input, it's your starting number, fine. We'll see what it looks like when you come back and get finished with your stuff. But in terms of what's happening offshore, you're absolutely spot on. The increases need to be in the double digits because the numbers have gone up again. The churn has gone up. People are leaving, etc. They have no qualms to leave one organisation to the next. And it's also in China as well as it is in India. So I think there is an issue. But again, you can do a lot of different things in order to mitigate those increases.
Okay. Can we have a look at the next polling question? So, how great would the labour arbitrage need to be for you to outsource an AP FTE? So this is on a monthly basis. Would $1,000 a month do it? So let's talk about AP clerks in Sydney. Probably, fully loaded, somewhere north of 48,000, maybe south of 58,000. So somewhere around 4,500. And India at the moment, AP clerks, $15,000 fully loaded a year?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, in that ballpark, yes.
Okay, and the salaries are going to double every 6 years? Okay, so what would it take you? Every 10 years. Okay, we'll give them that. What would it take you? How big would the labour arbitrage price have to be per month, per FTE, for you to go after this? Let's suppose you had, globally 100 FTEs in AP, 100 seat centre you're going to move. It's a big prize. So, voting: 1, $2,500 per month; 2, $2,000 per month; 3, $1,000 per month. Okay, so $1,000 a month won't do it for most of you. Okay, pretty sensible, but we can get the bulk of you over the line for anything north of $2,000. Donald, surprised at that?
Not really. I guess part of it also depends on how many people you've got sitting in AP. To make it worthwhile. Obviously, $1,000 a month if you had 200 people is a lot bigger number. But no, I think it's also wise because you've also got to factor in, apart from the issues around salary, inflation, and so on. You're looking at a management overhead, I think, of 20-25% to manage that relationship, unless you've got an existing kind of relationship. So I think that makes sense to me.
Okay. We're ready to start taking questions from the floor. It doesn't have to be on topics we've discussed so far. We have a number of roving mics. We've got one here, Steve, and Natalie. Sorry, it's not Natalie. It's somebody in the dark. I can't quite see. Another roving mic. If you have a question, you could raise your hand. Let's talk about government. Ray, we've had lots of changes in government. Lots of new faces, particularly at state level. Do you think it's going to change the government agenda around shared services and outsourcing?
Yeah, I certainly think it's going to be revisited, particularly here in New South Wales. I think the agenda that was certainly put forward with the previous government was very challenging and very aggressive. And I think the amalgamated agencies have struggled with that agenda to some extent. And with the focus around sort of cost and budget and some of the messages coming out from the new government, I think there's going to be looked at very closely because the proposed model is not necessarily the only model to drive the cost and efficiency out. So I think it'll get looked at quite significantly. I don't think it'll just get left alone. I think we will see changes, but whether that becomes more of a sort of federated model or whether that gets more autonomy for the amalgamated agencies to deliver the same sort of outcome but maybe in a different way, or whether they're going to revisit the actual holistic model across the whole of government, we're yet to see. But I think it has been challenging, and I think it's been particularly challenging for both the agencies themselves and the providers to achieve goals in the time frame set out. So I think we will see a review, and probably needs to happen, in my personal opinion.
Arno, you think we're going to see a change with the change in regime across New South Wales, Victoria and other states?
Nope. I think, and I don't want to start each of my little talks with a quote, but if you think about the old Who song, "We'll Never Get Fooled Again," there's a line in there that says, "Welcome to the new boss, just like the old boss." And I think that's exactly what will happen in New South Wales government. I don't think it's a priority, and I think it's not an area of focus or attention, to put it simply. So they have a broken shared services model, is the best way you could describe it today, and I don't see that really changing much in the next term of government. And I'm happy to place a bet on it here and now for when we come back next year, or wherever it is, Sydney or Melbourne, to see what change, if any, has actually occurred. And I say there will have been no material change whatsoever. It just isn't a focus, never has been, because if it had been, you wouldn't have had the situation that they've created for themselves, which is having large departments have their own shared services, having smaller agencies being competed for by other shared service agencies. It doesn't make sense. It's all the same stuff, but they always think that they're different, and so they're allowed to be different. And I think they will continue to be allowed to be different because I just don't think it's a priority for this current government. That's in New South Wales.
Asesh, you guys think government in Australia is a big opportunity space for you, one that you can start to pick up business in the next 3-4 years?
We think it's an opportunity. Next 3-4 years, I don't know. I think it definitely is an opportunity.
He doesn't want to take the bet.
I won't take the bet with you. I think it's an opportunity. We've started, slowly taking baby steps, but I think just the whole point of skill shortage in the country, I think it's going to get to a breaking point where they're going to have no other way out but to look at outsourcing, whether onshore or offshore, whatever that may be.
Donald, you agree with that, or where do you think the game's going to get played?
Look, just going to Arna's point, I'd say one thing. It's not too many things I'd say the previous New South Wales government actually, you'd either kind of give them a credit and a pat in the back. I agree the model is not perfect. But I think, from there has been an initiative over the last 3 years to at least come up with a new blueprint. I don't think it's feasible in any way, given the complexity of government, and I'm talking about any state government with the exception of probably WA, given Brian's very illuminating discussion earlier on in terms of the path they've gone through. But you've got to start with what you've got, and the fact is, when they started the blueprint a couple of years ago, a myriad of kind of broken relationships. The old CCSU was a debacle. Various in-house shared services. So they've come up with a blueprint. I think, in principle, probably it's sensible in that you can't they haven't got education, health, and everything else working properly yet. You have to just leave them to get on with it and then try and fix some of the other ones. Now, could they be doing it better? Absolutely. Could they be using the business requirements better? Absolutely. Or driving it through business requirements? Absolutely. There's a whole myriad of things they could certainly do better, but I think the blueprint that's there, I do agree it will need some changes to reflect. It would also help that if every government, not just at the beginning of its term, didn't decide every year or two to say, no matter what, why don't we just bang a few agencies together to give another cabinet minister a seat or what have you? That would help. But I do think that there is at least more potential to actually drive shared services benefits. I might add, though, part of that, one thing they should bring in, and we're yet to hear it, is some kind of Office of Fiscal Responsibility that actually provides independent reviews and tracks the benefits coming out of shared services against the business case, and does that at least every 2 or 3 years.
Okay, can we get the next polling question, please? State governments should set a specific target saving for shared services for the next 3 years and publish the target and have it independently audited. Do you agree, disagree, or don't know?
I didn't know you were going to put that up.
You couldn't pay me to put that up. High response rate would help. Okay. So the Association for Shared Services in Australia today called on the government to announce specific targets. Who wants to put their name to that? Okay, questions from the floor at this stage? Got one here? Come here.
So you guys on the sell side always come into our organisations and tell us what it is that you can deliver for us. Just a question for you. In terms of partnerships, what actually defines us being a customer on the buy side as core or as exploitable? And if we're exploitable, how do you actually exploit us?
With a smile on our face.
It's all the charm. Okay. Raja, when you look at customers.
Well, unfortunately, we have a very small list of customers to talk to. We are lucky that way. So, see, for us, it's, it has to fit into the domains of excellence for us. So we are very particular about where we work, and in that domain, what we do. So, we probably wouldn't want to go after a large telco, for example. It's something which is not our core competence. We want to go there. But where we believe we have the depth of domain, the depth of knowledge, and the ability to build a long-term value proposition, is the keys for us. So, if you look at our global customer list, we have essentially 9 customers who deliver us almost 80% of revenues. So that's how we work as a philosophy. That's how we always worked. And I think, it probably makes a lot of sense to us. If the customer isn't in our core sort of matrix, then I probably wouldn't even want to go there. But when we go there, we ensure we do a lot of work for them. So, it's just not APAR processing, but it's actually trying to help you with your strategy from there on to actual execution. So, every organization has their own business model, so ours is a little different.
Peter Barta, looking back at your time in the advisory space when you introduced your clients to the sell-side BPO providers and you looked deep into their souls, which box do you think they put your clients in? The core important clients, exploitable clients, or were there other boxes?
You're asking, what do the service providers think?
Yes. What went through the service provider's mind as you brought them in the door?
Well, it's hard to know what goes through their minds, but I think that, a commercial reality is that...
What they said was, thank God they haven't got Arno with them.
Well, let me back up. The word partner, is it a verb or a noun? Right? How do you want to actually use it? And I think when it comes to the relationship between a service provider and their client, that the degree to which the enterprises have aligned interests is quite narrow. It's a narrow slice of shared interest, which comes out through a contract. Outside of that, the organizations have differing needs and differing agendas. And in fairness to the service providers, the organizational push is to grow revenue and grow share of wallet. And so sometimes that can feel to a client like you're being exploited. But at the end of the day, a mature supplier doesn't overplay their hand in terms of trying to bring value to the table around that. And a mature buyer creates the opportunity for that, and then perhaps you start to move from a small P partner to a large P partner through those kinds of dynamics. That said, I think sometimes at the personal level you do get different behaviors around that, notwithstanding the enterprise. On the buy side, I think people want lower price, they want better service. And I think suppliers work hard to deliver those things, but those work against their broader interests of growing revenue and increasing share of wallet. So you always have tension there where perhaps clients may feel unloved and unwanted and apprehensive when the supplier gets walked in the door for any reason. Are they here to hear about my problems, or are they here to sell me something? I think is a perennial concern. But mature relationships and a mature approach to those relationships, I think, create a lot of value for both sides.
Okay. Additional questions on the floor? We have Natalie, a question over there.
Hi, I'm quite interested to hear on viewpoints around any potential growth to move from transactional-based work in shared services and in particular in offshore environments to more knowledge-based work. And Ashish, you're not allowed to answer.
All right. What was the last bit? Sorry, what was the last one?
Knowledge piece.
Moving from transactional-based work through to more knowledge-based work, judgment-based work in an offshore environment.
Rasesh?
Oh, you asked me to answer? No, she said I cannot answer.
Oh, you can't answer. Okay. Donald, what are you seeing?
I think there certainly is in the more mature shared services organisations, and I'm thinking particularly around, say, financial services, there's definitely trends there in terms of moving much more knowledge-based capability offshore. I mean, even speaking for my own organisation, the fact is a lot of the analytical work and research that we do as an organisation globally is all done out of Hyderabad. We source it there, and I'll tell you now, the quality is absolutely fantastic, like better than we would get onshore. Now, okay, that's within the Deloitte sphere, it's a captive. But I do think we're seeing, even in the provider space, in probably industry domains, more of a trend to actually move into specific areas that would be, much more value-adding and knowledge-based. And certainly my own experience is, by and large, when we're seeing that, is done fairly cautiously. We're seeing some pretty good results.
Okay, can we put up our next interactive question? You may vote now. So, the cloud's just another fad that will not have any meaningful impact on shared services for at least 3 years.
This each way better.
Too close to call or win by a nose? Win by a nose for the disagrees. Ray, surprised by that? Which way would you have voted?
Really.
Hold on first. Which way would you have voted?
Would I have voted? I would have voted disagree. I think it's inevitable that software as a service and cloud will, not only support shared services, but actually support organisations in a number of ways in the IT arena. I think this isn't the statistics not surprising, because I think there's not enough understanding of what that really means, and I think at this stage people are more comfortable to sit on the fence and wait and see, and see that being successful. So not overly surprising, but would we see that in 2 years' time? I'd be very surprised. I think it will be here to stay as part of the landscape.
Arno, where are you on the cloud, and are you surprised by those results?
Oh, absolutely agree with Ray. I think definitely disagree with the statement. It is already part of the fabric of a number of organisations. We'll only see an increase in it. And it's been underway for some time. It's not just something that's happened now, where there's been some hype around it. People have been delving into this area for some time. And I think you'll see quite an interesting radicalisation of all of those sorts of areas. I mean, just the other day, in fact, again, in this morning's press, Jeff Smith from Suncorp Business Services, thank you, again, allowing every type of device, whatever, into the environment, right? Sacrosanct stuff from a CIO perspective. It's that sort of out-of-the-box thinking that's actually going on at the moment, and is actually being implemented in a number of organisations. So I think we'll only see more of it. So absolutely with Ray, disagree.
Okay, so how many people are looking at decommissioning existing applications and moving to the cloud in the next 3 years? 1, 2. So who exactly are you putting into the cloud, guys? It's obviously their next door neighbour or something.
They don't know, doesn't surprise me. I mentioned the cloud to one of my colleagues, and he said, that's that white fluffy thing up above. I would say one area that I think that, and you touched upon it at the beginning, I think the cloud could be particularly interesting. In general at the moment, I'd say first of all, I see it's a sustainable technology. It's about cost reduction rather than a disruptive technology. However, I think you're starting to see solutions coming out, and I think this will be particularly interesting for the small and medium part of the market, where they may be looking to, along with technology upgrades, go down the kind of shared services path. And so, there's packages out there, Workday, which Dave Duffield, the founder of PeopleSoft, has come up with to provide HR services, pay as you go. They've now added finance. They're starting to get a lot of small and medium, and when I say small and medium out of the US, that's quite substantial. And I think there's going to be some technologies, leaving aside the existing SAPs and Oracles, I think there's some interesting solutions coming out. There's also domain solutions, I think, coming out for government, around local government. I think IBM have come up with a cloud offering. And so I absolutely think, yes, it's slow going at the moment. I think people are a bit reticent to see more examples of success, but I think it's going to come, and it's going to come pretty strongly.
Martin, if you really see, sorry to just jump in, I mean, the cloud is, if you really break it down and take away that big fluffy white thing out there, it's been in existence for a couple of decades. Yeah. If you look at the HR space and payroll space, it's been there, right? Where service providers have provided you the system, bundle it with infrastructure, technology, and you've paid by the payslip. So it's been there. It's all this nice, fluffy words, make it sound really sexy, that is, I think, today confusing people around what the cloud really is. And I think we just need to simplify it, break it down, and I disagree with that statement as well.
Okay, quick fire round before we go. You have to tell me whether you're long or short. So long, you believe it's a sustainable trend. Short, you believe it's just a fad, it's not going to happen. So let's start running down through. Niche advisors in the BPO space. Peter?
Short.
Short. Okay. Self-service applications in the line of business. Donald?
I have no idea.
Ray, do you think self-service reporting, people pulling down their own reports?
Look, I think self-service is the way to go, and yeah, absolutely.
Nothing like giving the question to the competition to get an answer, is there?
I do.
So we share a lot.
Ray, data warehousing, business warehouses in the shared services context, long or short?
Definitely long.
Definitely long. Okay. Destructive mobile technologies, Raja, long or short?
Oh, definitely. It's happening today. Long, definitely. at the moment. So at the moment, you see, at the end of the day, I was at a conference about 6 weeks back, and a young kid comes and tells, Raj, the problem today is my last tweet is more important than my entire educational degree. So, and that's the way to contact what's happening. So, absolutely yes.
Okay. Peter, captive shared service centres, long or short?
I'm long on captive shared service centres, but I think there's a hybrid model that's very important in that discussion as well. But I'm long on captive, yeah.
Centres of excellence, Arno, long or short?
Yeah, I think I'd go long on that. Yeah, I think there is definitely a need for it. We've seen it already, and I don't see that abating. Yes.
Okay. Nearshore, Rajesh. Think nearshore's got is valid anymore? Is it just an intermediate step?
Can I go in between long and short as medium?
Okay.
I think you just
We're nearly there. Got a last question. We'll go to Donal and Ray. Australia to raise the Webb Ellis Cup in New Zealand next year. Donald Graham, are you long or short in Australia?
I'm very long.
No, we're not talking about that now.
And being an Englishman, I'm very short.
Ladies and gentlemen, your G6 panel, thank you very, very much.